Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining our Chambers for Innovation and Clean Energy webinar, Powering Indiana's Rising Energy Demand, Clean Energy's Near-Term Strategic and Economic Opportunities. I'm Logan O'Neill, CIC's Midwest Regional Director and moderator for the discussion this afternoon. Indiana is at a pivotal moment, seeing rising energy demand, ambitious economic development goals, and a significant increase in clean energy opportunities converging at a crossroads in the state. The decisions made now about the state's energy future will have a profound impact in long-term economy, industry, and communities for decades to come. Our goal today is to delve into this topic with a fantastic group of leaders who are working in these rapidly changing landscapes and conversations. We'll be discussing how strategic investments in clean energy can not only help meet Indiana's growing energy demand, but also attract new industries, create good local jobs, and generate significant tax revenues. We'll explore the challenges and, more importantly, the incredible opportunities that lie ahead. But before we jump into this conversation, I want to briefly introduce our panelists. We have the incredible opportunity to invite 4 practitioners with us today, each bringing a unique and vital perspective to this conversation. I'll introduce each of them and ask them to give us a brief 20-second elevator pitch on today's topic. First, we have David Ober, the Senior Vice President, Business Operation and Finance at the Indiana Chamber of Commerce. David, your quick thoughts on the economic opportunities.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks to CIC for inviting me to speak and join the other panelists. This is just a huge opportunity for the state of Indiana, given where we are from an economic development standpoint. How do you serve all of the new customers that are coming online in the coming years? How do you match demand and supply at every hour of every day in perpetuity is kind of the job of our regulatory bodies and our utility companies. And so being at the top of the Indiana Chamber and working both with utilities as well as developers who are trying to get shovels turned on their projects, we're kind of at the crux of the conversation that we're having as a state, and then that kind of leans into our political advocacy. So it's an important time to be involved in the conversation.
Thank you, David. I appreciate it. And next up, Matt Kavjian, Executive Director of the Indiana Economic Development Association. Matt, floor is yours.
Thanks, Logan, and thanks everyone for this chance to be with you today. Just to echo David, I think we're at a pivotal time to be able to tell our story as a state about how well positioned we are and can be to meet these growing demands and growing opportunities. We've got some uniquenesses to share about, the advantages we have as a central location in the country, our low cost of power, our favorable tax and regulatory environment, the excellent fiber connectivity we have, and the availability of natural resources they need, like water. We've got a deep, strong talent and labor pool, and we're prepared to help shape that pool for the future to meet these needs. And again, I think it's just about we need to do as good a job as we can telling this story and positioning ourselves for these opportunities.
Appreciate it, Matt. We also have Randy Strasser, President of the White County Economic Development. Randy, mic is yours.
Thanks, Logan, and thanks very much for being a part of this. I think it's important for communities that have been successful in attracting renewable energies to their communities to tell those stories, and that those stories just don't get a chance to get out very often. It's usually the other end of the spectrum that gets heard most of the time. So White County's been very successful to be able to leverage the power that's generated here. It's been 100 years since Lake Freeman and Lake Schaefer were established with hydroelectric dams. So with the grid coming through this part of the country, or part of the county and everything, it's made us very attractive for renewable energies.
Thank you, Randy. I appreciate that. And finally, we're joined by Richard Roach, landowner based right here in Indiana.
Hey, thanks, Logan. As Logan said, we're farmers in north central Indiana. I'm the sixth generation here on the farm. We've been a part of a couple what we call clean energy projects. First being in 2013, we built an anaerobic digester where we generate electricity from food waste and livestock manures from all over the region. And then we have some ground in a solar project that was completed about a year ago.
Appreciate it. Well, thank you all for your opening comments and thoughts and setting the stage for our discussion. So what we'll do is we'll get right into our first round of questions. So we'll start our first round of questions with David. The Indiana Chamber sees the economic landscape from a very high vantage point. And so how does the Chamber, as the state's business voice, see clean energy improving Indiana businesses' financial standpoint and also their competitive standing?
Yeah, there was a data point a few years back, and it may have been a New York Times article where they were kind of ranking states as far as renewable development, and Indiana, for whatever reason, ended up at like number 4th on the list, which on a per capita basis for renewable development puts us right at the top of the heap. And we were being mentioned among states like California, New York, and Texas, which are obviously much larger populous states and also have a lot bigger GDPs. From that, through that kind of lens, I mean, Indiana companies, and I'll kind of mention, we're a broad-based business group, so we include a lot of different members, and most of our load serving entities are also members of the chamber, as well as large manufacturers, medium and small companies. So we're kind of looking at it from a state economic growth perspective, first and foremost. In order to hit our targets for GDP growth as a state, what type of economic activity needs to happen, and then how do you serve that from an energy demand perspective? And we're being challenged, like many other states are today, with some large users seeking to locate in our state. And us as a state, we've kind of been predicting pretty stagnant demand growth over the past probably 10 or longer years, mostly due to efficiency and just not having the large growth that maybe some other states have seen. And so our utility companies have not necessarily been planning to expand their supply in order to meet larger demand, because there hasn't been an incentive to do so. It would have been seen as overbuilding if they had decided to propose anything larger than what was absolutely critical. So from a clean energy perspective, now we just kind of need all of the electrons that we can get our hands on in order to facilitate the growth that we're seeing. And it's also a demand from some of the new entities that are building in the state, whether it's EV battery manufacturing or that's the kind of supply chain around that, semiconductor growth in parts of the state, or kind of the big one that everybody's paying attention to is data center growth. So we're looking at it, primarily, how do you facilitate long-term economic growth? But then there's a cost and a risk advantage as well. So cost to consumers, some of our members like NIPSCO and CenterPoint are kind of replacing legacy generation systems with renewables, just because there's a long-term cost savings to their customers, both their residential customers, but also their business customers. So that they're going to see some cost savings there over the long haul. But even manufacturers, and two good examples for the state of Indiana would be like Cummins and Steel Dynamics. So Steel Dynamics has kind of locked in a long-term contract with a wind farm to serve some percentage of their demand. Cummins has done a virtual PPA to be able to offset all of their demand. And so these are kind of hedges against the risk of exposure to higher energy prices or marketplace dynamics. But Indiana is punching above its weight class when it comes to development. We're seeing that kind of be challenged by some of the local permitting headwinds, but we're in a really good spot to improve on our competitive advantage.
Well, thank you, David. Appreciate that perspective. Matt, let's turn to you. And from a statewide economic development lens, how do you feel that strategization for meeting Indiana's growing economic development, energy demand in a way that doesn't just supply power, but actively markets Indiana as an irresistible location for industries that demand both immense and increasingly clean energy?
Thank you. Yeah, I think from a statewide economic development perspective, we need to do two things at once. We've got to ensure capacity for growth and position energy as part of our brand. And so that means reliable, scalable energy infrastructure for sure, but also increasingly clean and forward-looking options that meet those demands of advanced manufacturers, data centers, and emerging tech industries. So to market Indiana effectively, we have to speak the language of our selectors and CEOs that are looking at us because they want to know, can we get power that we need when we need it? Is it affordable? Is it sustainable enough to meet their ESG requirements and goals to satisfy uh, national and global investors and customers, not all of whom may look at things the same way people in state do, but they're bringing those expectations to the table. So if we can answer yes to all three of those things through our thoughtful investments, yes, in grid modernization and diversification of our generation sources, and bringing speed to service, we don't just make Indiana a good possible site, we make it a preferred one. So to me, it's not just about the utility scale, it's communities that we can present as shovel ready, uh, showing that we're investing in workforce training for our clean energy sectors and to collaborate across public-private lines. All those things together really demonstrate our value proposition. And so I think our message to the market should really be, we're not just powering growth, we're future-proofing it.
That future proof is a great perspective and fascinating look in strategic marketing the state's energy mix. Randy, White County has had a great track record with utility scale over, like you said, 100 years with utility scale clean energy projects. But looking back, what's some of the most profound lessons that you guys have learned about balancing community identity and land use with the community, with the economic upsides of those projects? And how can other counties learn from your guys' journey without having to reinvent the wheel?
Well, I think everybody's learning that journey all over again in today's world with technology and the need for more generation on the grid. White County's economy is kind of unique. The fact that it's split into thirds, actually. We have tourism because of the lakes and in Indiana Beach here. Business and industry is healthy, and we have a large business and industry group here in the county. And then, of course, agriculture and renewables have been a large part of the ag world for the past 20 years. Understanding the past and building for the future. Past administrations have established those EDA agreements and designated funds for EDA payments with guidelines for allocation to all communities. So 20 years ago, this was all new, and it was all about something new. So looking to the future really didn't come to play a part until probably the last probably 2 or 3 years, with data centers and more renewables actually being needed. So they made sure that they had the road use agreements were a big part of guaranteeing that roads were in better condition after construction had started on these projects. Uh, Land use standards were established with setbacks to protect neighboring properties. And, lessons learned was basically how we network and work with the community, and how we hold to those zoning regulations. One of those lessons learned was one solar farm was granted a setback waiver from the county's standard setbacks, and that's basically fueled a substantial amount of resistance that's continued on today. With any of the projects that we look at, whether it's wind, solar, battery storage, or even data centers. So communicating and making sure that everybody is heard in how we work with them. Uh, the journey forward, without reinventing the wheel. White County's been a leader in the state with renewables, and has a strong relationship with our municipal, legal, and financial advisors. We've shared a lot of information with other communities and counties across the state. And, the agreements that we've put together have been pretty much tried and tested over the last 20 years. And, it's working with those legal and financial people to make sure that moving forward that uh, we have our everything covered here, and it's not a long-term debt for the county.
Great. I appreciate that. Richard, you have a unique perspective as a landowner who's directly participated in several different economic and clean energy developments in several ways. And so, what's been some of the surprising or unexpected aspects of your experience, and what are some core pieces of wisdom that you could impart on landowners in Indiana who are weighing these opportunities for their specific properties or their specific uses?
Yeah, thanks, Logan. You know, what I would say is each of these experiences, the development of our anaerobic digester and the solar project, have been completely new ventures for us. And it's been a very steep learning curve along the way. As far as what's most surprising, what I would say my takeaway is as we've developed relationships with NIPSCO, as well as Wabash Valley Power Association through REMC, is just really the need that does exist for the kilowatt in our communities and in our state. I think that the general populace really doesn't understand how limited we have been. And then in addition to that, just the amount of time that it takes to develop these projects, whether it be a clean energy project or all the more common sources of electrical production, just how long that takes. They don't happen overnight, and how we're scaling our usage and we're outrunning the production there. That really opened our eyes. We would have, in our little small niche agribusiness, we wouldn't have known that otherwise. And I think that's something that really needs to be communicated as we're moving forward. I think as a community, as a nation, take for granted when we flip that light switch on, the lights have always come on. We've not experienced that not happening. And so when we're spoiled like that, that's how I would communicate it. We don't recognize what it takes for that to happen. And I think, our business, our family, we're very bullish the kilowatt. We think that demand is going to continue to increase. And that's why we've tried to enter this market in the two ventures that we are currently a part of. As far as pieces of wisdom that I would communicate, whether you're an agribusiness like us who also owns land, or you're a passive landowner or investment property owner, something like that, I think that it has to be viewed as a perspective of this is a business. So that asset that you hold, is unique. And in that, there's no absolute right or wrong as we're considering these clean energy projects. There's no absolute right, whether solar or wind or digester is right or wrong. It's if it's the proper fit for you, for your family, for your business, for the community in that specific location. And I think that it needs to be approached. I think emotion needs to be left out of it. And I think it has to be a business decision. And in business, there's consequences outside of fiscal, but I think we need to be approaching it that way. And in that approach, I would advise seeking really good legal counsel. I would advise going and visiting multiple other projects, speaking with multiple other landowners on both sides, those who have chose to participate and those who have chosen not to, with an open mind and a willingness to hear both sides, and then mold that all together and form your own opinion on how you choose to move forward, understanding it's not absolute. It's just what's best for you, your business, your family, and your community as well.
Great. That's incredibly valuable insight, and I appreciate it. Okay, well, let's move to our next set of questions. And Matt, Indiana's clean manufacturing is creating thousands of jobs. And so can you paint a picture of how the growing availability of clean energy and homegrown clean energy supply chain creates a kind of self-reinforcing cycle that amplifies the site selection advantages and draws in even more transformational investments, talent, and also workforce?
Well, manufacturing is becoming one of Indiana's biggest growth stories for sure. And clean energy is a current running right through it, no pun intended. When communities can offer reliable and affordable and increasingly renewable energy, it immediately strengthens their position in site selection conversations. I mean, this was something that came up even in a most recent Site Selectors Guild meeting. What really moves the needle is when clean energy infrastructure is supported by the local supply chain. And so the companies that are making the components for solar and EV and battery storage, and they're within the same state or region, that's a real force multiplier. When a company sees that their suppliers and workforce and energy resources are all going to be close by, that value proposition compounds. And that's when you really shift from being seen as just competitive to being like the preferred or obvious choice. And we're seeing that play out already. For instance, like a battery plant will lead to a materials recycler next door, which will draw in an automation firm, which is then in turn going to hire locally trained engineers. And then you've got, the Ivy Techs or the Vincennes who can be pulled in to create tailored curriculum. So then you're not just creating sort of a single project one-off, but you're building kind of a clean energy ecosystem in a place. And so that creates kind of a flywheel effect, if you will. The more you invest in that clean infrastructure and the local supply chain to support it, the more attractive you become to the next wave of projects. And so now with every project, you're adding jobs, you're strengthening that local tax base, and you're showing that Indiana isn't just kind of playing catch up here, but setting pace.
No, I appreciate that. It's absolutely correct. And, I also want to point out and mention that CIC published each year our Jobs and Economic Impact Report and Indiana report. We'll go ahead and actually link that in the chat. And so folks can check that out as well. That was published back in the early part of the year. So Randy, while touching on the well-known benefits like tax revenues, landowner payments, things like that, how do you feel clean energy projects like those in White County can weave themselves into the very fabric and future identity of rural communities?
Uh, Typically, let me just start off with typically with landowner payments. That's typically something that local officials and myself were never privy to that information. So a lot of to the general public, unless any of the landowners want to share that information with somebody, that's usually unknown. Um, but the nice part about it is those payments do help those farmers and landowners offset the cost of farming operations as well. In White County, renewable tax revenue accounts for approximately 35% of all tax revenue. And I'll say that again, 35% of all tax revenue. And that you can see that in the tax rates. In some townships with renewables, tax rates would actually be more than 3 times as much without the renewables in those townships. And that assessed value that comes with it. In the last 10 years, from 2012 to 22, there's been over 23 million in new personal property tax that's been generated just from the renewables. So that attracts, that impacts not only our homeowners and property owners like that, but our business and industry, other business and industry, to keep those tax rates down. Economic development agreement funds have been helped with fire stations. So when these come in, we have those economic development agreements with them, and those funds all help with funding fire stations, water and sewer projects in the past, and some special school funding in the past as well too. Some communities have actually been lucky enough to work directly with the energy companies on those farms to actually have projects like splash pads and park improvements, something that can be shared by the entire community and not just one specific group. Current balances on our from those economic development funds that we get in those agreements are in the millions, and it allows the county to have a substantial reserve just in case there's emergencies or other economic development projects that may need support in the future too. They've actually, our Mid-American Commerce Park was actually put together and funded by EDA funds. Along with the financial benefits countywide, having a large amount of renewable generation available, that's an attraction for new business and industry that's looking to locate here. And there's so many of those new business and industry, they're literally looking for green energy. So, and we're seeing those and dealing with those in the last year or so.
Interesting, and it's you hear it more and more often of industries looking for those communities more and more often. So nice to hear that, and interesting to hear that direct from you. Richard, how do clean energy projects kind of transform the long-term stewardship and values of agricultural lands? And also, do you see futures where the clean energy generation agricultural practices don't just like coexist, but also enhance each other, perhaps even opening up new opportunities for Indiana's farming community?
Yeah, absolutely, Logan. I think that you're hitting some really good points here, and I'm going to just take it back to the business perspective a little bit. The stewardship piece, I think that we're looking at the land from a stewardship perspective. I'm not sure I'm willing to go to that place with it, because as soon as if we're going to large scale solar projects, I view it as we're transforming from a production agriculture to a development type type process. And so that's kind of how we're looking at it. One of my biggest critiques of our entire industry, I've felt like, is that farmers, landowners have oftentimes undervalued themselves. Our biggest asset in the business that we do is our ground, and that's something that we're very interested in protecting, but also, trying to look for what is the best ROI, the return on that investment, as any other business is going to be doing. But that's more than just immediate. That's a long-term view, and there's a lot of things that need to be considered in that. And that's why I think a lot of due diligence is required for those who are entertaining participating in some of these projects. But the other perspective that I have, Logan, is looking at our willingness as an industry to be able to adapt and change with what consumers are demanding. So an example that I would use is, there's not too many disposable cameras sold anymore, right? And the reason is that was replaced by the phones that we all carry in our pocket. And so that industry, if you're just hanging on to selling disposable cameras, you're likely just not viable anymore. There was nothing wrong with that at that time. It fit the need at that time, but the needs have changed. And I can see that happening in our industry. I always like to say that the public has this romanticized view of agriculture, that it's an 80-acre farm with 5 chickens, 10 cattle, and 10 pigs with a red barn and a really nice picket fence. Well, it's just not that in today's society. And it is a business. It's something that we're managing, and we have to be thinking long-term, especially in a family-owned agriculture business. We have to be thinking generationally, and the decisions that we're making today are 20, 30-year decisions. And so with that, I think we have to be thinking, what is the consumer demanding? We're just we're producing a commodity. Corn, soybeans, wheat, cattle, hogs, it's a commodity, something that's marketable and saleable. And I view that same thing with electricity. It's something that's marketable and sellable. It's a commodity. And so I think that we have to be willing to adapt to what is being demanded with the asset that we have. And right now, a lot of things are driven by policy, right, Logan? And I look at the previous administration, they had a mandate that 50% of new vehicles sold by 2030 have to be clean energy vehicles. And so you think about the biggest commodity that we grow in this state being corn. You look at the corn soybean alliance, and 45% of the corn that we grow in this state is used for ethanol. What is ethanol? It's a fuel for an internal combustion engine. If we're saying by 2030, half of the new ones sold are not going to be an internal combustion engine, that's really a huge hit on demand for the largest commodity that we grow. So linear thinking for a businessman is saying, okay, if demand is being reduced for a commodity I'm growing, what's it being replaced by, and how do I participate in that market? And so as a farmer, as an agribusinessman, it's being replaced largely by EVs. Okay, how do I get in that market? And our options right now at this time that I'm aware of are solar, wind, and digesters. And we're participating in 2 of those 3. And it's driven by a business perspective of, we got to meet the need. We got to play the hand we're dealt. We're not dealing those hands. We're playing the hand that's dealt. And we have to be strategic. We have to be calculated. We have to be forward thinking. We have to be willing to adapt. And that's how I would encourage other landowners to view that and the approach to take.
Well, I appreciate it, and very forward-looking perspective on those perspectives. David, moving back to you, and Indiana's manufacturing heartland is very well known. And how can clean energy investments drive the modernization in manufacturing and then permeate with a new kind of resilience and attractiveness, kind of especially as global supply chains demand more sustainability practices? But then also, I know you kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, but kind of then talk about a little bit of those emerging stories, maybe a little bit more that it kind of illustrate that transformation.
Yeah, so kind of following through from the previous question, just cost and risk mitigation. many of our larger businesses are part of multinational corporations, and those, and then we have supply chains that kind of set up around those industry clusters. Indiana is well known for its auto manufacturing. We're seeing a renaissance in that space with the development of EV battery manufacturing hubs within the state. A lot of that kind of flows through some of the CHIPS Act policy setting, as well as the IRA and now the OBBA. And so we're seeing policy kind of drive some market dynamics there. But really, if you're competing for capital, either from the general marketplace or even within your own company, you have to be able to show that you can drive a return from your operations. And so anything that you can do from a energy cost savings or efficiency standpoint is going to help enable you to deliver that return. And also just, kind of lean operations and lean manufacturing is going to, boost that bottom line. So I mentioned a couple of examples earlier. Cummins in Columbus, Indiana has engaged a partner. They've invested in like a 15-year virtual PPA to offset 100% of their operations. So Meadow Lake Wind Farm in Northwest Indiana, that may be located in White County. Randy would know that, but they've engaged this long-term transaction to be able to offset and help them reach some of their global goals as a company. And it's a hedge, right? And so it allows them to control that cost and have certainty in what those costs are going to be. Steel Dynamics engaged with another wind farm for 308 megawatts for steel production. When we talk about the OBBA and the IRA and some of the domestic production requirements and some of the supply chain around that, in a global marketplace with tariffs and all of these other dynamics that we're seeing with the current administration, you have to be able to be competitive, not just domestically, but internationally. And so reducing the carbon per ton of steel using some of these technologies that are available, that is going to help make your product more cost competitive. It's going to drive investment into your business. It's going to help you deliver that return that's expected from your shareholders. And so it's kind of it helps you get to the secret sauce of pulling all of the levers. This is an easy lever to pull. The return is there. It's just, and many energy managers and executives and financial planners within these companies are starting to realize that and lean in on these strategies.
Okay, great. Randy, in economic development, cohesive leadership is critical, and a lot of times brings in a lot of projects. What's kind of one of the single most impactful pieces of advice that you can give as a local leader and to another local leader in another Indiana county who's just kind of beginning to explore how clean energy can be a part of their community and their community's economic future in this space?
I've had the luxury, Logan, of being an elected official for 16 years. So dealing with the public sometimes is pretty tough, especially when you start talking about change and it creates culture shock with a lot of people. So I wish I really had something that would blow people away here, but and this may sound crazy, but the best public education, the best thing that we can do is public education on the grid and the need for current and future generation, as well as the need for farmers to have the ability to operate their farms as business and generate additional income. I think we're at a breaking point there. We did a presentation last fall. It's called Energy 101 that gave the details of the flow of the changing legislation at the state and federal levels, all the way down to the energy providers. This included details by, NIPSCO and Wabash Valley about their long-term 25 and 30-year plans that providers use to meet state and federal regulations, as well as meeting the goals of their boards and their investors. And trying to get the public to understand that today we are in year 30 of a former 30-year plan, and we're actually in year one of a future 30-year plan. And what that means as these energy companies ebb and flow with legislation that comes out of DC and down to Indianapolis. So our goal here was to educate elected officials. One of the things that came out in this was, and this came from MISO, was that demand going into 2025 was only going to increase by 38 gigawatts, but the supply was going to be reduced by 110 gigawatts. There's a big gap there, and that just as the need, as Richard talked about, the need for that new generation and the future demand is going to be great. So our goal was to basically answer two important and very elementary questions. Number one, why do the energy companies want to be here in White County? And the answer to that is the grid. The grid was built here 100 years ago for hydroelectric dams, and they've continued to improve and expand it as new generation projects actually popped up. The second question is, why do the farmers want renewable energy on their property? And the answer is for additional income. They basically have about $5 in the production of a bushel of corn, and the market is at $3.50. So they need to bridge that gap with other sources of income. And what kind of proactive steps do we work with here in local? Strong zoning requirements that have been vetted by the public. Make sure we get the public involved in understanding as we have these new projects, understanding what those strong zoning regulations are and adhere to them. Community engagement agreements to address landowners and communities that feel that they've been negatively impacted. Those energy companies are willing to work with them, but understand community engagement. Strong road use and decommissioning agreements. I just had my son tell me that he was driving through some White County roads in the county, and he goes, "My God, they're in really good shape. A lot of these country roads." That's because in these renewable energy farms, they've adhered to a strong road use agreements and made sure that those roads were improved. Annual public education on the grid and the need for new generation, I think, is very important. It's a story that doesn't get told. And just like Richard said, one day when the lights don't come on, what was it we missed 5 years ago? And I think the other thing to the public too is an annual notice on the financial benefits of renewable investments, an impact on tax rates, the EDA investments, what those EDA payments and where those are going, and the private energy investments. Tell those stories, tell the good stories that are going on, instead of the bad stories and the people telling the bad stories all the time.
Great, Randy. Appreciate it. Richard, when developers or local officials approach landowners, what's kind of one of those crucial elements of communication and trust building that maybe often gets overlooked? And from your perspective, what kind of actions could be taken to ensure that truly mutually beneficial relationships are built for decades to last?
Yeah, really good question, Logan. As far as local officials and developers approaching landowners, what I really think I want to emphasize is that we're leaving emotion out of it. So often we allow emotions to get in the way of logical, practical, and straight line thinking. And I think that we need to be able to eliminate that. emotional side of it. There's a place and a piece for that, but I think rarely does emotion lead to good calculated long-term decisions. The other thing that I think really we need to be outlining and considering is, it's a complex problem, and it's a complex issue that we really are talking about here today. And as I mentioned in my opening comments, none of it's absolute right or wrong, but especially in the clean energy projects, there's always going to be a trade-off. We need power to be produced. We need it to be transported because of the lifestyles that we all live and how our economy, our world has developed. And so if we look at coal, it's dirty, right? That's its downside. Nuclear is dangerous. Digesters can be stinky. Wind and solar are going to take away from potential crop production, right? Everything's going to have a trade-off. There's no perfect singular solution. If there were, obviously that's what we would be pursuing. But I think a blend, a combination of everything that I just mentioned is really the right answer, and it's not overweighting. Then to your question about the contracts and developing good relationships, I really would encourage landowners. It's more to consider than just a dollar amount. There's way more to the contract, and as much as I'd like to think that handshake relationships and business, relationships are a thing, I really think those are a thing of the past. And what we're talking about here is really just as strong as the contract. And in order for that to be strong, it needs to be mutually beneficial for everybody in that agreement. And I think that's the developer, that's the landowner, and that's the community. Those are the three parties that are represented. And so I think that each of those parties should be putting forth equal amounts of effort to ensure that their interests are protected there. And that would be a criticism of mine for the ag sector / landowners, is not pursuing adequate legal counsel to review, understand, think through, process these contracts that are being drawn up, being written in. And I'll take this time to really thank the White County leaders. I think that they've taken a lot of heat. The voice of opposition is always louder than the voice of support. I think we all can recognize that. But White County really has done a good job of looking out for the community. Randy did a nice job highlighting a lot of the benefits. We have adjacent counties that have not. And it's obvious when you go into those communities, the difference. And so I just think that it's a very calculated, strategic approach that each party, the community, the developer, and the landowner are looking out for their own interests, but also each other's. And at the end of the day, the agreement is just as strong as the contract. And there's going to be things that are going to be overlooked, things that are going to be missed, and that's going to be okay, as long as everybody's going into it with the mindset that I just mentioned.
Great. Thank you, Richard. Real quick, I want to mention that we have a resource for chambers and economic development leaders. It's called the Chambers for Innovation and Clean Energy Chamber Clean Energy Toolkit. It's a go-to resource for advancing leadership in the clean energy space. We'll post it in our chat, but then also we are getting close to time. But if you do have a question, please go ahead and post it in the Q&A. And if we do have time, we'll try and get to it. And if not, we will try and make sure that we capture those, and we will try and get with our panelists and make sure we get those answered directly with you as well. David, the Chamber is a powerful voice for the business community beyond legislation. What's a kind of a vital shift in the mindset or collaborative spirit that the Chamber is working to foster kind of across state agencies, utilities, the businesses, to make Indiana's energy infrastructure kind of a magnet for tomorrow's industries?
Yeah, I'm sure that most of you have noticed that our energy policy has vacillated back and forth over each 4-year period based on who kind of occupies the White House and where the balance of power is. And we will always engage on legislation and advocate at the state and federal level where it makes sense to kind of challenge people's kind of preset notions is that energy infrastructure cannot just be looked at as a cost center or some political football. And if you really truly believe that an all of the above approach is anything more than just a platitude, then we have to challenge this notion that and really adopt that mindset that everything needs to be um, on the table, that energy production is foundational to economic growth. I mean, we bring in annually, sometimes twice annually, forecasters from S&P Global to come in and take a look at our the nuts and bolts of the Indiana economy and predict out what that level of growth is going to be, and then we base our budgets off of that data. Those inputs feed into our financial models for the state. And so it's really important that if we say we're going to grow by 3%, and we have been an outlier in the Midwest, growing faster than our neighbors, that we have all of the tools to be able to execute on that economic growth. And so aggregating demand and then understanding how we're going to generate enough supply to meet that demand. And ideally, what I keep hearing from leaders in the state is we want to be a net energy exporter like we were back in the early 2000s and before. And in order to do that, you really do have to kind of pull off your blinders, embrace all of the above. And that means, putting in place an ecosystem that lends itself to growth, growth in the clean energy and the renewable sector. It leans in on efficiency and cost savings, as well as the utility scale. Let's grow our supply using kind of all of the technologies at our fingertips.
Great. Thank you, David. David, uh, last question, but permitting processes for energy infrastructure can be complex. If you could kind of wave a magic wand and maybe streamline some sort of aspect of siting and permitting, kind of either at the state or local level to kind of unlock the development of local electrons for large industrial users and kind of all these projects that are happening across the state, what would it be? And then what kind of ripple effect would that create for reform across the state's economic landscape?
Yeah, it's kind of the question of the moment in Indiana is how bold will legislators be or regulators be going forward? And there are a couple of different things that I might say to answer this question. But going back to my time in the legislature, one of my great misses of my political career has been to not establish a statewide permitting standard. We contemplated it in 2017 and didn't do it. And the conversation has become a lot more complicated and politically challenging today than even it was then. And it seemed insurmountable at the time. But if I could wave a magic wand, I think that having one set of rules that apply across all 92 counties of the state, rather than having a patchwork quilt of setbacks and moratoriums and all of the different policies that are being adopted and deployed at the local level, would give certainty to developers that when they plant capital in the state of Indiana, that they're certain that they're going to be able to deliver it when they enter into the interconnection queue at these regional processes, and they go to sign contracts, that they can market those contracts and they can get a commercial operation date that is feasible. We would see a lot more energy development in the state. The hard part is going to be, there's a lot of local opposition, as has been mentioned by, other speakers and panelists. So if I could wave my magic wand, and this is a project that, you know, the Indiana Chamber is working on, how do you arm local, state officials, business associations, and Hoosiers about the value creation that comes from these types of projects through a grant that we're working with the U.S. Energy Foundation on. We need one policy book that everybody plays by. And, you know, given some political pressures and some policy pressures on local budgets, it seems like maybe the stars will align, but it is not going to be without challenges. And certainly since next year is an election year, that just lays on even more political pressure for folks that are going to be making these decisions. But we remain hopeful.
Well, thank you, David, for that, and we'll watch for your guys' work in that space. Matt, we'll get back to my final question for you. Collaboration often sounds like an abstract, and can you share an example of your example of or vision of how the IEDA kind of uniquely orchestrates your partnerships between your different organizations, perhaps unexpected ones sometimes, to break down some barriers to help in education and leadership of clean energy investments, and in a way that kind of sometimes feels maybe seamless and efficient.
Sure. I mean, I think for those that don't know, the Indiana Economic Development Association is kind of that gathering place for local economic developers, regional ones, utilities, architects, construction firms, engineering firms, lenders and financiers and consultants, and all these people that have a stake in this. And so it's a natural environment in which to share information. And I'm really thrilled to hear kind of the work that David and the Chamber are doing here, and hope we can be leveraged to you know, be a conduit of information when that time comes. So I think the thing that we offer is maybe the potential to really bring together a lot of stakeholders, some of whom which ordinarily might not find themselves in the same room, and be a connective tissue for, you know, people that are coming and looking for potential development in the state with all these different players. So I could envision it like maybe one example would be a community trying to attract a battery manufacturing plant. And in order to make that happen, they need access to the clean power. They need a trained workforce. They need site readiness and public support. The IEDA, my association, we're positioned well to help those people coordinate when it comes to maybe their regional thinking around grid upgrades, about bringing in the local economic or education partner like an Ivy Tech to help maybe build a micro-credential program to train technicians, to loop in that local workforce board for funding support, or engage local chambers and community groups on the education piece. We can do that in a way that translates across sectors, align interests, and to help people move those ideas to action. And really, on a broader level, we can help those educational efforts that are really needed, kind of like David said, around demystifying clean energy, showing what it is, what it isn't, where the value really is coming from, that they may not be seeing, and how to leverage that for broader economic growth. So by simplifying that language and surfacing some models, sharing some stories, we can make some of these things seem a little less abstract and more like clear opportunities for communities of all size. So that'd be my vision, and you know, really look forward to working with partners to make that happen.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it. Well, I want to give another huge thank you to our panelists, David Ober, Matt Kavjian, Randy Strasser, and Richard Roach, for their time today and their incredible insights. We encourage you to reach out to our CICE team. I know we didn't get to questions today, but please direct those to our CICE team, and we will get those questions directed to the correct speaker, and we will get answers to you as soon as possible. Special thank you to our audience for attending and your engagement in today's webinar just shows how important the topic is for the state. If you have any additional questions about today's content or just general questions about utility scale energy, and all of our panelists as well as the CSE team, available resources, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can also find resources specifically for the Chamber and economic development leaders in the CICE Clean Energy Toolkit, which was posted in the chat today and be found on our website, chambersforinnovation.com. A recording of this webinar will be sent to everyone who registered, and you also receive the links for the Indiana Clean Energy Jobs and Economic Impact Report and the CICE Chamber Clean Energy Toolkit that we mentioned today. Thanks again for joining, and if you like today's content and want to learn more or have an idea for an upcoming webinar, send us an email. Have a great afternoon.